Good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. Welcome to DBA Fundamentals for September 14th, 2021. Today's presentation is from the wonderful Rob Sewell, doing creating Azure SQL Database users with a service principal in Azure DevOps. On your screen, you'll be able to see on the top right-hand corner, the three leaders of the DBA Fundamentals group, Steve Cantrell, Shane O'Neill, and myself, Kevin Wilkie. To the right of our names, you'll also see our Twitter handles. If you ever need anything from any of us, there's the way to reach us, or the quickest way anyway. Below that, you'll see our many social media channels. The top one being Meetup. Easiest way to get hold of all of our presentations that are coming up, and so you can join them, be aware of them, whatnot. Below that is our website, dbafund.org, where you can see all of our past presentations as well as any of our upcoming presentations. Go from there. Also, you'll see below that is our YouTube channel called the dbafundtube.com, where you can actually subscribe to that channel, and you will know quickly when any of our presentations are pushed out there for consumption, and you'll be able to view that for all time, at least as long as the internet is up. Also, you can go beneath that. You can connect with us on Twitter, where we are DBA Fun. You can also connect to us on Slack and on LinkedIn, where we have many of our conversations going on pretty well all the time. So with that, we bring the most important part of my little portion of the presentation. All sessions are recorded and are usually available within 1 to 2 days, where you can connect and see it on DBA FunTube. Speaking of that, while you're on DBA FunTube, make sure to actually subscribe to the channel. It helps our numbers, and it also helps you know exactly when everything is pushed out there. So with that, we talk about the wonderful Rob Sewell. Here is his bio. There's not much you need to know about him, more than the fact that he has the most wonderful beard of all time. So with that, we go to Rob.
Okay, let's do something like that. So hopefully now I'm sharing my screen, which confusingly is going to look just like I'm sharing my camera. So let's do that instead, and then it'll look just like it's me in front of a screen, because it's me in front of a screen. Most people are going to start their presentations by doing something funky, like showing their slides and explaining who they are and all of that. But I'm a bit crazy, so I don't have a demo environment right now. So let's start there. So we'll start by deploying a demo environment. So we're just going to run this pipeline. It can't find that because it should be looking in main, and we'll click run. And that's going to go off, and it's going to deploy the Elastic Pool infrastructure to the production environment. Excellent. Except, of course, before we deploy to production, somebody needs to approve. So we'd better say that Dan said it was okay. So thanks, Dan. So we'll approve that. And what I like to do, because I've been bitten by this before, is just wait and see if this starts running. And while we do, we'll just go and run some code. And all this code, let's have a look at this code. All this code's going to do, it's going to connect to my Key Vault. It's going to get me some details, and then it's going to see if it can connect to a DBA instance. So we'll just hit F8, and that will start pinging away. Good, we've got all of our client secrets. I was telling Kevin earlier on, when I went and checked this, my secret for my service principal had actually expired 2 days ago, which is good because I've given it a two-year limit. So that will start doing that, and good. So our pipeline is running. starting to get things. We'll explain what all of this does in a minute. And yeah, SQL Server, it's not ready. Excellent. So with all that in place, let's talk about what we were going to talk about. And the rules are, if you have a question, ask the question. Because if you've got a question, somebody else will have a question, probably the same. And I am always happy to go down rabbit holes and end up who knows where. It'll be fun. So we're going to talk about controlling permissions to Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance using Excel and Azure DevOps. Wow. So this is me. And one thing we want to look at is if you want to find any of my presentations, any of the code that I've used, you can find it by going to beard.media/presentations. If you wish to get in touch with me, then come here to Twitter, SQL DBA with Beard. So just make sure you spell it right, and then you can get in touch with me. You'll also see that we've written a book, beard.media/book. It's a book about DBA tools. So let's go back to them. I am a dual MVP. I do a lot of work in both the PowerShell and the data communities. I'm one of the organizers of the PowerShell Conference Europe. I do a lot of data work as well. Outside of that, I basically help people automate stuff. So what I'm generally doing is making sure that people can deploy infrastructure for their data projects. Let's do that. So what's the problem? Well, 2020 was, a bit of a problem. Everything went a bit weird. But that's not the problem that we're going to be talking about. The problem is going to be my clicker that is not going to click. There we go. So a client said to me, could you please automate a solution and make us able to deploy permissions to Azure SQL Database, please? And what was happening was that the business IT team, the folk that sat between the business and the DBAs, were getting lots of requests. Please, can this person have access? Please, can that person have access? Please, can this group have access to this? Who has got access to these and that and the other? And they were constantly coming back over to the DBA team and getting them to do things. And this was all happening on-prem. And I was involved in the project to migrate their databases from on-prem into the cloud. And I said, like, seriously, this is crazy. Can I, you need to think about how we can improve this solution. They did some other things where we wrote Jupyter notebooks to help gather their permissions for the auditors and put them into Excel sheets, and they loved that. But this one, they were like, yeah, absolutely, that's a really good idea. Yeah, we'd like to do that. So can you automate this? I'm like, yeah, sure, we can automate this. And they said, good, because see, the thing is, what happens now is we use Excel and we really like it. So we want to carry on using Excel, please. Okay. We can do that, I suppose. So that's what we did. And that's what this presentation is about. So we need to create Azure SQL Database users. And we've got two principal types that can do this. So we can either use our SQL Server administrator, basically like our SA account. When we set up our server, that is the one that we can use. Or if we've got an Azure Active Directory and we've joined our SQL Server to it, which we'll explain about in a while, we can use our Azure Active Directory admin for our SQL Server. So in the same way as we would add our DBA group to sysadmin or whatever role we create to enable them to do the work, we've got Azure Active Directory admin for SQL Server. And both of those allow you to create users based on SQL Server authentication logins, but we don't want that. So we can't use SQL Server Administrator. And we can't really use our Azure Active Directory admin unless we create contained database users based on users and groups from AAD. Excellent. Sounds like just exactly what we want. A contained database user is a very special type of user. We don't need to create a login. We only have a database user, and then we will only have permission to that database. So we've got one option, just the one leaf to choose. So I love automation. I love pipelines. We're going to have automated infrastructure as code deployment for this entire estate that we were building. So I said, let's have an automated permissions as code pipeline as well. Build our security into our process, into our DevOps pipelines. And if possible, we don't want any manual intervention. If we've agreed that this is right, let the code go and do its stuff. Okay, so how do we create an Azure Active Directory contained database user? We can use T-SQL. It's really simple. Create user, name @domain.com, email address. Add in the special words from external provider. Done. In the database context, sorted. Problem is, only connections that are established with an Active Directory accounts can create other Active Directory users. So here is the problem that we need to resolve. So I just wrote a list of what we needed to achieve. And what we needed to achieve is apply the permissions using an SPN. So we'll need an Azure SQL Server identity. We're going to need Active Directory admins. We're going to need the directory readers role. That was the most difficult part of this whole process. And Azure DevOps pipeline and the permissions in an Excel sheet. Excellent. So how can we log in as our SPN and run our T-SQL? We're going to use dbatools. dbatools, for those that don't know, is a PowerShell module, community authored, community tested, free, and enables you to administer and manage your SQL Server estate based on-prem, but we can connect to Azure SQL Database because it's just SQL. And in general, we can do a lot of the things that you could do in the portal or you could do with T-SQL. But we need to do it in a special way. So we need to set up our permissions in this particular way. And then we can invoke DBA query and run our query. Easy. There's our T-SQL we're going to write. I like to write good code that explains what's going on, has some try catches and things in it. So we're just going to create our user in a database from external provider, go through and do it, run it with DBA tools. Easy. Excellent. Tick. Done. The next thing we need to talk about is Azure SQL Server needs to have an identity. So our identity here is in the same way as when we're creating our on-prem SQL hosts, they get in Active Directory an object, so the computer object that we can assign permissions to, and it allows the computer, the host, to be able to get information from Active Directory. If you just create an Azure SQL Server, you can create it completely standalone without any knowledge of any Active Directory. But if you do, and in this case we did, what we need to do is we need to create our SQL Server with an identity. So if we're using PowerShell to create our SQL Server, then we just add the assign identity switch. If we're using Terraform, which is what we've got deploying, let's have a look. Let's see what we've got over here. Let's go to this pipeline. See, this is why we check things. Why have you decided that you cannot get it? Cannot validate argument on the parameter vault name. Interesting. So you can see that an hour ago, this ran successfully. Oh, from there. I wonder. Let's come and have a look. So we'll edit our Yaml. Oh, Kevin, I told you, the curse strikes again. Let's go like this. So we'll try
It's too often.
It happens. It's fun. Let's do our deploy. Let's do our edits. We'll make that go away. And let's have a look in a new window and we'll look and see where did we fall over. So we fell over on, come to me, getting our Azure client secret from our key vault. Okay, so Control K, Control 0 minimizes, folds all of our code. We can then makes it a little bit simpler to grab into where things happened. Except that Rob cleverly named things. There we go. Get the Azure client secret from the key vault and set it to a variable. So, that would be a good point, wouldn't it? We haven't got our key vault name here. So that's interesting because we do have it there. So why did Rob not put the key vault name? Let's just make it simple and not bother to try and be clever here. We will add in our key vault name and we will say equals Sewell dash and probably another dash there. That looks correct. That looks correct. Say because, so we write a commit message. Why did we make this mistake? Sorry, why did we change this code? Because Rob deleted the branch because he was ever. There we go. And we'll save that. That's going to commit directly to here. Now, look at that. Excellent. The beauty of continuous deployment. Our pipeline immediately started. And now I'm going to be nervous and we'll come back and check this a few times and see what happens. So while we're just making sure that it starts, let's have a look at the pipeline itself. So this is our deploy. And let's look at it. Let's look at it in here because it'll look a little nicer. So here is our deploy. So we start off with a trigger so that you can see trigger when the branch includes main. That's the permissions one, Rob. Let's look at that one instead. There we go. Set some variables. Here are our variables. Why didn't I put them in the right place? I don't know. And then what we do is we're going to deploy ourselves in a resource group. So let's use AZ CLI and just do a group create and a storage account create and a storage container create. And we're doing this because Terraform is going to do our deployments and Terraform needs to store its state in a file. So for infrastructure as code with Terraform, what it does is it goes, this is the code that you want. This is what you want at the end. Okay, I'm going to compare that to what I know about, which is stored in this state file. And then I will generate what we need to do to make it look like this. It's really easy to break that. All you need to do is go into the portal, click around, make a change, update something in a particular way, and suddenly what Terraform is doing, looking from the state file to the code that you've written to what you want it to be, doesn't work anymore. So this is why nowadays I use Bicep to deploy my Azure infrastructure. I'm actually doing a pre-con on it at Past Summit. It's far better, because what it does is it goes, this is the code that you want. This is your expected outcome. I'm going to go and check Azure and see what it looks like. And then I'm going to generate the difference and make it so. So you can see how that's a much better option for what we want. So let's come back to here. Let's come back to here. Oh, my lordy. Why have we failed this time? Welcome. Oh, no, it's the wrong one. Good. Whew. The reason I laughed is because that has happened to me before. It has failed at the same place because I've missed a single quote or something fun like that. But no, we're still going. So now what we're doing is we are. Do you get wider? No. So we got our client IP. We have then added our firewall rule to our key vault so that we can go and get our secrets. We're going to get our secrets from the key vault. That was the bit that fell over. And we're going to replace them in a Terraform file. So here's another problem with using Terraform. If we look in our build, what we need to do is we need to use, let's go to that one. Connection. And we say, I want you to store your state file here. It's a back end of Azure RM. We're going to give you some variables, var dot, our variables, storage account name, resource group name. Our container is going to be called Terraform, and our key, which is the file, is going to be called Elastic Pull. But before we can do that, we need to actually be able to connect to Azure itself. So this is the other reason why I use Bicep, because when I use Bicep, I can use the permissions of whatever's running the account, so my service connection, and that will be able to interact with the portal. Here, I need to give some permissions to Terraform for Terraform to use to connect to Azure to be able to read the storage account and then to be able to do whatever it needs to do. So more complication, as you can see, more things to go wrong. So we have to set up our provider for Azure RM. So we need to put in our subscription ID, client ID, our client secret. Oh, hello. We need to put a secret in a file. Yeah, we don't like doing that. So we've got our variables. And our variables live not in this variables file, but confusingly in this backend config.tfvars file. And here we could, if we wanted to, write all of these things. Okay, so we could put all of our information in there, great, except that we'd have our client ID and secret in here. And it's also not very reusable because with it like this, I can pick the code up and use it anywhere. So in our pipeline, oh, I've got two things open in the same place. Good work, Rob. In our pipeline, which is still running, that's a good sign. In our pipeline, what we do, once we've got our secrets, we replace our variables. So you saw that in this, close the wrong one, Rob. In this file, we've got things that start with double underscores and end with double underscores. And all we do is we replace all of those. It says 6 tokens replaced out of 6. So those are going to live in the file, but only for the length of time that that hosted agent is running. So this is a hosted agent, so it's basically just a container. It gets thrown away by Azure once you finish using it. So it's much safer to keep my secrets in there. Not totally safe, but much safer. So we replace our variables. Occasionally, when things go wrong, so Kevin, you were asking about troubleshooting. How do I troubleshoot? So one of the things that I do in Azure DevOps pipelines to troubleshoot is I've got a step that I enable or disable, and that will list the file contents or list the files. So I use get child item, recurse, and show me all the files that I've got to see if I get in trouble with paths or whatever. And I also use a list file content, so I get content of certain files. So let's just come to See how far down we can go without giving away too much. Oh no, it's okay. I don't actually look at the vars file, so I can just make sure and see exactly what has been created, see what is in there. That's one way that I do. Next step we do is we initialize our Terraform. So again, we've got to initialize Terraform, we've got to select our workspace, we've got to plan our Terraform, we've got to apply our Terraform. In Bicep, I don't have to go through all of those steps. So initialize our Terraform, set my Terraform up, make sure I've got the version installed that I need on this host, make sure I have the provider installed that I need, make sure I've got anything else, the back end for Azure, all of those things need to be ready and installed. So that's what we do there. Then we have a workspace. So I have a workspace because I want dev and UAT and prod to look exactly the same, apart from maybe the names or the amount of CPU and RAM that we have, maybe the permissions as well. So I choose a workspace. It's just a way of separating up how my infrastructure as code works. Once I've done that, I do my plan. My plan is the point where we look at the file, the state file, we look at what's expected, and we make it so. Or we hope that we make it so. And then we have an apply, and the apply will then do the work that we expect. So now that that's running, we'll go back to our original broadcast. So let's pick this one here. So for our SQL Server to be able to read Active Directory, if you remember, what we're doing is we're creating users, and the users or groups that we're creating on our Azure SQL Server are going to come from our Azure Active Directory. So we need to be able to read that. So we're going to have our identity. This is some Terraform code. We just choose an identity of a type system assigned. The Bicep code looks pretty similar to that. Great, so we've got that ticked off on our box. The next thing we need to do is to set our Active Directory admin. So this is the user or the group that has the ability to assign roles within our Azure SQL Server and our Azure SQL Databases. In the portal, we can literally just choose the Active Directory admin and click some boxes and find our principals. If we're doing it in PowerShell, then we have to use the beautifully titled set AZ SQL Server Active Directory Administrator command and pick the server name and the object ID of the user that we're going to put in. If we're doing it in Terraform or we're doing it in Bicep, then we'll have an Azure Active Directory Administrator or Azure AD Administrator block where we can pass in our username and object ID that we want. Great, that's pretty easy. Once we've set those things up, then they're done. Now we get to the most difficult part. Actually, we get to the second most difficult part, don't we? Because and in previous days, the most difficult part has been this. So it's doing our plan. It's also going a little slower than normal. So we've selected that, we've got our plan. Good, we're okay. We are all okay. So most difficult part, the most difficult part, directory readers role. Remember how I said Azure SQL Server identity meant that you had, in effect, an object in Active Directory, which allowed you to read the Active Directory, get information. It's not strictly true. You can only read Azure Active Directory if you are a member of the directory readers role. Now in on-prem, all users, all objects, all service accounts, all of those things, they automatically have the permissions to be able to read. In Azure, not so. So what we need to do is we need to be able to add both the SPN and the SQL Server object that we created with our identity flag into this role. So in my Azure Active Directory, I can assign directory readers, I can find the roles, I can go and click, put a principal in, done, easy. However, if you go and look at the documentation, you'll see that to be able to add an object into the directory readers role, The script must be executed by a global administrator or a privileged roles administrator. And as you can imagine, those are pretty high-powered permissions. And they're the sort of thing that big global insurance companies don't give to bearded consultants just because they say, please can I have it? But that's fair enough. What you can do is you can create a role. Sorry, you can create a group in Azure Active Directory, and you can assign the role to that group. And then you can give the permissions to manage that group to a bearded consultant. So you can maybe say, hey, I'd like to have a group for my Azure SQL instances that I'm creating in this region. Please can I have that? I can manage it. It means I can put my SQL servers in as I create them, and only once does somebody have to go and assign this permissions. 3 months later of discussions and paperwork and documentation and proposals and discussions with global Azure AD teams, it was decided that that was not going to be so, and that the process to be followed had to be followed for every single individual Azure SQL instance. So your mileage might vary, depends on the sort of organization you're in. If you're a small organization, you've got those permissions, you can just go and add it. If you're in a medium-sized organization and you can persuade them to add a group, then great. If you're in a large organization, maybe they won't allow those permissions, but whichever way around, that's how we do it. So lastly, we need an Azure DevOps pipeline, which reminds me, no surprise, it's no surprise that we're going to get an error. An invalid client secret is provided. Wow. Well, that is completely bizarre. So what it's saying is that I'm trying to connect to Azure RM, and what I'm not able to do is get to the authenticated, get to Active Directory and grab my service principals, because an invalid client secret is provided. Oh, did we replace all of our tokens? Yes, we replaced all of our tokens. So sometimes what happens is this step will succeed because it will replace all of the tokens it finds. Interesting. Let's go back and have a look at our retrieval of our secrets. So there's our secret. Oh, I got a very good reason why that's failed. Well, we're all learning, so I hope it's okay. We'll get to see what's going on. Let's come and have a look in. We're in the wrong one. Let's come and have a look in. Oh, really? Yes, this one. Yes, please. Let's have a look in here. Let's have a look in our key vault. Let's have a look in our secrets. Holy moly. Azure client secret is what it says. And oh lordy, let's go to there. Service principal GUID and client secret. Well, that blatantly is not going to work, is it? Because this is our service principal. And where have you gone? We're looking for, where's it gone? Had it just now. We're looking for, there we go. It's your client secret. Bet that's what it is. Ooh. In there. We'll save that because Rob is a fool. Deleted the branch. Save that there. We'll run that. We'll see if it works. Oh, we'll need to put in our permissions. And I pressed run, didn't I? So I can cancel that. I can cancel that one because it automatically ran. So this will be going. Well, there we go. That's half an hour of watching Rob try and build his demo environment, which normally mainly works. That's going. Let's check this script. SQL Server still not ready. Correct. And let's go back to our PowerPoint. Woohoo! So we've got an Azure DevOps pipeline. Yeah. This pipeline is going to go and get the information from an Excel sheet and push it into our Azure SQL Server. So it's going to make it so. So in the same way as we've been talking about our Terraform state file holding what we've got and our code holding what we expect, then we're going to have our permissions in our Excel sheet. It's going to be what we expect. And this script is going to make it exactly so. It actually doesn't need any sort of state file. It's going to go through and it's going to check against the instance itself which users are allowed to have contained database access to this particular database. Any users that aren't in that list will remove. Which users should be in which groups on this contained database? Any users that are in the wrong groups will be removed. And this will do all of this. Starts off very much like we just saw. So at the top, this is our Azure DevOps YAML pipeline. So this is how we define what our pipeline does. We hold our pipelines in code so we can see what happens. Yeah, I'd ask a question because Rob will just keep talking. So if you have a question, please feel free. Please feel free to shout. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on. So this is our DevOps YAML pipeline. And what it says at the top is trigger. So when do I start? So trigger when branches include main. So we're only going to run off our main branch because main defines what is actually happening. And actually, there's a load of other stuff in this repository. So actually only trigger when the paths include anything under permissions. So we can always just carry on from there. And then we set some variables. And sometimes Rob gets it right and sometimes he doesn't. In fact, what I am going to do to save you guys continually seeing that, I'm just going to put it on this screen so that I can at least see when it falls over, in which case we shall carry on. So Once it's done that, it then goes and gets the client IP. So because we're using a hosted agent, because it's easier to manage, we pay for it, Microsoft take care of it. One gets spun up, we use it, it gets thrown away. Great. But that means that applying permissions to allowing access to our SQL Server is more difficult. So we need to know the IP address of our agent. Now you might say, well, hang on a minute, can we not just allow Azure services through, or can we not give permissions just to the IPs that are assigned to the region that we've got? You can do all of those things. What you'll find, though, is that more IPs are available to you than the number of firewall rules that you're allowed to have. And secondly, you'll find that in my experience, maybe 80% of the pipeline runs you do will use an IP range from West Europe or from UK South, wherever you happen to be running from. And the other 20% will come from somewhere close, because there aren't enough IPs in the world. So Microsoft does the best to run your pipeline than to run the pipeline with only with this specific IP address from this range, please. So the easiest thing for us to do, I'm just going to show you this because it makes me happy. So we've planned our Terraform. These are the actions we're going to take, and now we are applying. So now it's going to start building. So we'll leave that over there. We need to know what our IP address our host has for our agent. So we can use, I just use this particular website, use different ones in different places to go and get the IP address. And then I add it to the firewall rule for my key vault. And as well as that, I have a clicker that I've clicked off the screen for. And I also add the firewall rule to the Azure SQL Server. And then I run the script, deploy permissions from Excel workbook. Go and do that. And then when we've finished, we then remove the firewall rule from our SQL Server, and we remove the firewall rule from our Azure Key Vault. And it's important to notice there that there's two conditions always available to us. So if we look here, and that means no matter what happens, I want you to run this task. So normally, come back, thank you very much. Normally, a Azure DevOps pipeline is just going to follow on, one after the other, one after the other. And if this job fails, then it stops. But actually, if it fails after we've added an IP address into our key vault, where we manage our secrets, or into our SQL Server, where we manage our data, we'd really kind of like not to have that open when we no longer need it. So this task makes sure that we always run the task to remove the firewalls. Great. So we've got our Azure DevOps, SQL Server still creating, good. And we've got our pipeline. So all we need now is our permissions in an Excel sheet. And people say to me, well, really, Rob, is Excel the best way to do this? No, absolutely not. But is it the best way for this particular client and this particular team to do it? Yes. Does it make for a cool thing to show? Sure, I think it does. Would I recommend it if I was starting from scratch? No, absolutely not. But what we have is an Excel sheet. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that we absolutely validated all of our inputs. So on the front page, we put our SQL instances, however many of them there were in that particular table. Then we added our databases, names of all of our databases. And then we added our roles and a description of the roles. Now you can see here, those are just default roles, but we had specific roles for applications, and we put the description in there as well, because this was filled in by a business IT person rather than a business person or a technician, as it were. So once we've got that, and then our SQL instance dropdown, column A, is then filled from that one before. And our principal we can then add in, I want to have these principles. And no, absolutely, we did not just add users, but I could think up of funny names for people you know in the community to add as users to my Active Directory, much more than I could think of funny names for groups that we could put in, because I could only think of boring names for groups. So I've used users, you should use groups. And then I've got an admin flag. So the admin flag is back to that sysadmin type role, except in Azure SQL Server, we have a DB manager and a login manager role that are available in the master database. And what those allow you to do is to assign permissions to other databases and to create databases. What they don't allow you to do is to view databases. So then we look at our roles. So we've got our instance, we've got our database, which again comes from the drop down before, we've got our principal name, and then we add whichever role we wish to have on there. So we've got a load of roles. Awesome, success. Everything is brilliant, apart from the fact that that pipeline's still running, but it is running, stuff is being created. And what happens is the business user makes a change to this Excel sheet, and then they push it to source control. Rob, seriously? Oh, we interrupt this session to inform you that the SQL instance is ready. That's absolutely amazing. Hurrah. So I will stop looking at this. This is stuff much more exciting to look at now. So let's come over here. We've got that note. Let's not look at that one. Let's look at this. Here we go. Yep. So our instance is completely created. Now we can connect to it. So let's connect to it. Let's just reload that completely. Azure Data Studio. We might have the same fun with this. It has not always worked, but we will connect to Azure and we're going to connect with this account. So this is our sysadmin account. Why have you not got the thing? Let's hope that works. That's good. There are our databases. So we've created our SQL instance. We've got our 4 databases. If we look in our master database, we can look at our users. So we've got our Beard SQL admins group and sysadmin. And if we look everywhere else, then we have no users. Security and login, we've got no users. And remember I said it was really easy. All we needed to do was to create a new query, and we could write create user Rob at consulting.co.uk. Yep. Oops. Yep. From external provider. Excellent. So I'm going to create myself as a user in the Beard App 1 database, and I'm just going to run that, and everything will be, oh no. Oh, well, that's a pain, isn't it? So here's the error that we get, and it says only connections established with Active Directory accounts can create other Active Directory. Oh yeah, we knew that. We were told that before. And this brought up a bit of an issue because the DBA team said, well, wait a minute, if I'm trying to solve a problem, how do I make sure that I can do this? How can I add a user quickly just to make sure that everything's okay, or add them to a role or make a change? And I was like, it's okay, we can use the same PowerShell as we've used before. So we've got some PowerShell that looks like this. Let's go to this one and let's add a user manually. So let's start with this. So we'll add a special user. So the most special person is Catherine Wilhelmsen, and we're going to add her to, hopefully not to that database as login manager. That would be silly. Let's add her to master. Go. I'll run that. So we're going to just go and let's see. We're going to go and get our secrets out of Azure Key Vault. So get AZ Key Vault secret. And when we do this, what we get is a secret value, which we then need to turn into a proper credential, into a clear text value from our credential, so that we can then connect to Azure SQL. And when we connect to Azure SQL, if we have a look, you can see that we're connected to our instance with dbatools. And if we weren't zoomed in so much, we would see that the connected as user was our credential. So we've got our query. That's the one you saw in the permissions, just adding a user. And we're going to run that query against the master database. Rob, let's run it against the master database. And we'll do that. And that's easy. Then you see, it's just simple. That's all we need to do. Oh, no. Look, what we've got here is we failed to do this because the server identity does not have Azure Active Directory readers permission. Just there. Yeah. So we have to provide that permission. And because I am God in my own environment, I'm going to go to Azure Active Directory, and I'm going to click on Roles and Administrators, and I'm going to find the Directory Readers role, and I'm going to add, well, I could add Gianluca Sartori because he's awesome, but I am actually going to add the Beard Elastic SQL, the SQL Server identity, and I'll click Add. And the reason we do that right now is because now we have to wait again, because, oops, let's not do all of the commented out bit, let's do it to there. Because when we try and run it, it will say, oh, it will say it's ready already. Sometimes I've obviously got timed this exactly. I've obviously timed that exactly right. Sometimes it takes time for Azure Active Directory just to sync so you can have a connection. But let's just validate that we've got our connection. So we'll come to here and we'll go and see, and we added Catherine to master. So there we go. So with code, we can use the SPN, we can just go and add a user. Well, that's great, but you know what? I want a bit more. Okay. So let's add myself, and we will copy this, and we'll come down to here, and we'll add that. And as you can see, added me in. Excellent. So now I can connect as myself. So instead of connecting as, you see here, I'm connected as SQL admin. Actually, I want to connect as myself to master. There we go. Excellent. So now I can connect as master. There are no logins. We'll have a look at our database. Got our master database. We've got Catherine as a user. That's me. I'm in as sysadmin. Let's have a look. Normally as sysadmin, I'd be able to go and explore this database. But let's see what happens if I try and run a query here. So let's select name from sys.tables. Ha! It shouldn't have done that. We'll take that away. We'll say we can't do that anymore. Let's prove that we can create a user, not in the audit database, in the reporting database. Can I add myself in? Oh no, still connected as that user. Let's connect as me. Can I add a user? Oh, it already exists because we're in master again. Let's try that. There we go. User has been created, so that's Beard reporting 3. Have a look over here, security users, and there I am. Excellent. So we can go and create our users. Brilliant. Okay, so let's go to, can't find my slide. There we go. This is what our pipeline looks like. I'm not going to show you too much about this because we'll just go and look at one that's running. But it's important to notice here that we're removing a user who doesn't have permissions. And we're also going to check everything. So you can see all is good, all is good, all is good, all is good. But we're removing a user from a role that they were in wasn't right. So what we've got is an Excel file with our permissions stored in it that the business unit can use. We've got an Azure SQL instance which we've created with Azure Active Directory identity so that it can connect to it, understands that it's part of Azure Active Directory, that it's got an object account in there that permissions can be assigned to, and we've given it a director reader so it is allowed to read the users details to make sure that they exist in Active Directory. I'm going to use dbatools to do our connections to our Azure SQL instance and to run our T-SQL to create our users. We're going to store all of our secrets in Azure Key Vault, and we're going to run all of this in Azure DevOps. That's the end of the slides. Let's see it in action. Let's see what happens. So now I'm going to be a business user. So the business user has a share where they have SQL instance permissions. And if I could actually double click on the right place, we'd be able to open up Excel, which would be much more useful. So we've got our Excel sheet. We've got our front page. Our front page has our SQL instances, so we could add more in there, our databases and our roles. And because yes, thank you for the pro tip. That's awesome. Because we have given the table a name, so we know what we've got, it means that for this, we can actually validate that our data is coming from the correct place. And I've forgotten how to do it, so I'm not going to talk about that. But we validate back to that instance. We've got our principals, we've got our admins, we've got our databases. So let's add in another thing, whatever. Let's connect to our instance. We'll pick Beard App 2, I think, and then we'll find a user. So let's have a look. Who have we got here? Let's go for Drew. Pitferg on Twitter, most awesome, wonderful person. We'll give Drew deny data writer on Beard App 2. So you can have a look, maybe if he's got permissions, but we're going to deny him data writer. So then the user would save the Excel sheet and close it. He must close it, otherwise source control doesn't work. And then in here, at the command line, they would write git. They probably wouldn't do a git status, but we'll do a git status because I want to check what mistakes I've made. And we'll do a git add, and they do this. So because I've done a git status at the command line, it tab completes the name of the file. So we're going to add our file, stage our file ready to go. And then we're going to say, right, git commit -m and a message. Why have I made this change? And this was one of the things that really was sold to this company that they absolutely adored. Because what I can do is I can put Jira ticket 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or snow ticket 87654, or permissions applied, which meant that when the business unit did this, and then they did a git push. Of course, because you made changes up there, you fool. So I obviously did. Oh, beautiful. Good work, Rob. So let's explain what's happened for those that don't understand. What we explained to all of the users, and what I've just completely forgotten to do, is that we said that you always must, no matter what happens, you always must run Git Pull before you do anything. And what Git Pull does is it gets all of the remote changes that are up there and brings them back down onto your machine. Then you make your changes, then you do a Git push. Well, then you do a commit, then you do a Git push. If you don't, you get, well, I can't do this because the tip of your current branch is behind. So what I just need to check is, that's okay. What happens? What changes did we make here? Oh, well, will you look at it? The reason my deployment of my demo environment failed is because I didn't upload this change. What a wally. There we go. Same one there. See, I should have trusted myself. I bet that'll be the same too. Yep, that's the same too. Right, so we're just going to put these changes in. Secret names are hard. There we go. Right, so now we should be able to do a git pull, which we should have done first. Oh, now we've got a merge conflict. Excellent. See, you get to see all of the fun stuff. Get merge conflicts and everything. So we've got a merge conflict, which means that the file that was remote and the file that was on local have differences that the tool doesn't know how to deal with. How are we going to deal with those? So we'll do a Control F and we'll look for this. And Visual Studio Code is awesome because it goes, well, look, what I've got is this. Oh yeah, Rob hard coded the key vault naming, didn't he? And what I've got incoming is this. So which one would you like to keep? So you can accept the current change, which is here in green. We can accept the incoming change, which is here, like this. Or you can accept both changes. So what we're going to do is we are going to accept both changes and see what it does. Excellent. What it's done is exactly not what I wanted it to take, but that's okay. We will now. Oh, do we have some more? No, we don't. Did we save the file? No, we didn't. We need to save our file. Now we can add our merge change in, and we can just accept that. And now we'll go and fix what's broken. Don't ask me a question for a minute, because I need to get this bit right. Otherwise, all things will go wrong. So we need to make sure that we've got the keys on like that, and we'll have it like that. Beautiful. Okay, so now we can write commit that is fixed next errors. Again, don't ever put messages like that. So our user has finished with making their change to their Excel file. They'll now do a git push, and up goes our Excel file into the code. And in the cloud, if we go and have a look in the right window, we have a look at our pipelines. You can see that we want to cancel our deployment, please. Yes, thank you very much. So you can see that our deploy permissions script has already started running. And if we go and have a look, we can look here for this one run that's running now. We can look at our changes. If we look at our changes, you can see that the JIRA ticket number or the snow ticket number or the however it is audited number is assigned to this change. And this change, even though it's an Excel sheet, it gives us the option to look at the two differences of what was applied. But even better than that is the fact that when we look into our script, we will see that in the logs, we've started running our deployment. So let's just, I do wish I could minimize some of this and get rid of it, but I never can. So we're now going to start running our permission script. So it's now going to grab our secrets from Key Vault, and it's going to log into our SQL Server with our SPN. And now it's going to start running. Here we go. So we're starting adding our permissions. If you have a look, you can see we're adding Gianluca Sartori as sysadmin. He's got DB manager and login manager on master. So's Andre Kaman, so's Argenis Fernandez, so's William Durkin. They've got all of those permissions. Let's go and prove that role. Let's make sure that this is true. So we'll look in master. We're looking at security, look at our users, and when we refresh, here will come all our users. They've all been added in, and I would think that gradually we're going to start having some of these will be full as well. Yep, so we've started getting users being added into here. So our script is automatically adding all of our users. So that's a good start. And once it's finished doing that, it's then going to go and validate that everything is correct. And it'll start doing that any second now. Still adding users, still adding users. These are all coming out of our Excel sheet, making sure everything is as so. So now we've done that, now we're going to check our admin users. So which users it is that have got DB manager and login manager permission on our master database. And as you can see, you remember we added Catherine. Well, now the beard is sad. You made the beard sad because Catherine Wilhelmsen is a user on master and shouldn't be. So what we're going to do is Catherine will now be dropped. Poof, gone. Not in the Excel sheet. The Excel sheet is the source of truth. Gone. If we have a look at the rest of our permissions. So we checked our admin users. Now we're going to check that all of our Excel users are in the databases. So yep, everything, all of our logins are correct. Now we're going to check that all of our users in our database are in our Excel sheet. Yep, that all looks good. And now we're going to check that all of our users have the right roles. So those also all look good. So everything is as we expect it to be. We have our permissions available to us in code. Now, if you wish to go and play with this code, you wish to see what it does and see these demonstrations, if we start with beard.media/presentations, that's going to take you to my GitHub repository. And in there, you can see everything. Look in 2021, this, I'm afraid I didn't create your own directory for DB8 fundamentals. What I did was I used the Data Saturday Oslo one from not very long ago. This has all of the code, has my PowerPoint and everything that we've, including a cat called Destroy. There, isn't he beautiful? What a beautiful, precious he is. He also provided me with a perfect opportunity for something to distract. So, my name is Rob. Do you have any questions?
No questions have actually come in. I do want to make a point of, I will put a note on the DBA Fund website about the fact that the presentations are the presentation, the link to the presentations is here, and I'll use the link you just gave.
Okay.
But I do want to actually make note for anyone else that's out there listening. Rob has actually published a book, well, a series of stuff on the wonderful website about PowerShell. Anything y'all need to know about PowerShell is going to be there. PowerShell and SQL Server and all the fun that y'all may have learned about in dbatools. The man, the myth, the legend has actually put a thing called Learn dbatools in a month of lunches. So you could learn how to use dbatools to make your job easier as a DBA, or if you're just a normal developer, this will help it out too. It's all good. It's all out there and it's all for learning. And I'll actually put a link out there to one of the websites for that one as well.
Yeah, so beard.media/book is the one to go to, and that'll just take you straight to there. And right now, so you'll save up to 40%, so you'll actually save 30%. Pretty good deal. So it's there, and you can interact with us via the book as well. So there we go.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, my pleasure. I always love to promote books that I actually use and enjoy. So with that, if no one else has any questions, I do want to thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
As I say that, Shane brings up a question.
Shane, you need to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. You're very quiet, mate. He's gone shy. Oh, the broken mic. Oh, okay, the broken mic one.
Not the first time he said that one.
The question that Shane is too afraid to say out loud is, so you're saying that we can use Excel as a front end? Well, Shane, I'm saying that you can use Excel as a front end if you wish. Excel's brilliant, right? It does everything that it needs to, and it is a good thing to use in this particular exact scenario, where the requirement was we don't want to change what our business users do. They are used to filling in these requests into Excel, and then we would pass them into the DBA team, who would then read them and then perform an action. So if we can make it so that we can automate it from when they've done that onwards, it's so much easier. Obviously, much better if we can do it earlier in the pipeline than that. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the fact that it wasn't just a generic presentation with a demo that worked beautifully, and you could see how I troubleshooted and worked out how to fix what was going wrong, which, funnily enough, Kevin and I were talking about before we started. How I like it. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy seeing that. So I hope you did as well.
All right.
Yeah, the purple gamer's chair is literally one of the comfiest things I've got. I'm so glad that I spent the money on a decent chair.
Yep, I agree with you also, Brent. The fact that it quote unquote broke during the presentation was perfect. I think that actually showed I learned more watching people correct code than I do the normal just presentations. So with that, I do want to thank you all. Remember, go out, buy the book, go to see his presentations from GitHub. They're all awesome, as always, Rob. We do thank you for joining DBA Fundamentals. And with that, we will see y'all next time.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
You too.